All right, Tony, thanks a lot and welcome everybody. We typically do a couple of seminars a year, one in the spring on how to open your pool up and then in the fall how to put the pool back to bed. And it's kind of funny after having a sunny day like this, it's kind of hard to talk about winterizing, but we're getting close to the point where it's really time to consider winterizing your pool if you don't use it year round. And so I've been with BioGuard for over 30 years and have a lot of experience on both operating the pool during the summer as well as winterizing. So with that, let's get started. This is not very complicated, and get my slide to progress here. These are really the objectives. This will take, depending on questions, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you have. But these are really our main objectives when we winterize a pool. We want to make sure that when you open up your pool next spring, it is crystal clear and there's no bacteria, no algae growth. Maybe you have a little bit of debris on the bottom of the pool, but the water should be clear. I know that sounds simple, and sometimes people that haven't had their pool for a while think that, every May they need to have the, you might say, the swamp cleaning party. And that's not necessary. With a little bit of preventative maintenance here in the fall, we can make sure that pool does not turn into the green monster with algae next spring. So it's not that difficult, but just a few things we'll cover. And then really the last bullet point is we want to protect the pool surfaces, the equipment from freeze damage. And especially after last winter, there was a fair amount of freeze damage in the Portland, Vancouver area. And so we definitely want to avoid that because that can be extremely costly. This is really what we're trying to avoid. So the pool from turning in, a green algae-filled swamp. Oops, I need to admit a couple more people here. Thank you for joining us. And these other two slides that you see on the right, that's a filter, a cartridge filter that's got a big crack in it. That's from freeze damage, because if there's water in the filter and it's not moving and we get freezing temperatures, obviously it's the water is going to freeze, it's going to expand, and it's going to break the filter. Same thing happened down here on the pump. You can see that big crack in the pump housing. That's from freeze damage. So we definitely want to avoid that kind of an issue. So first things first, the first thing is we want to make sure we don't close the pool too early. And what we base when to close the pool is on water temperature, not air temperature, but water temperature. When the when the water temperature gets down below 65 degrees, we do that because the colder the water is, the longer the winterizing products that we put in are going to last. It's kind of like during the summer, when it's hot out, the sun's out, the water's warm, people are in the pool, we use more chlorine. Kind of the opposite happens during the winter, because if you think about it, that water, we need to keep it looking good for, 7 months during the winter. And the winterizing products last a lot longer when the water is cold. So I don't know where your water temperature's at in your pool right now, but my guess is it's probably over 65 degrees. And until it gets down to 65, just do your normal maintenance, keep the chlorine level up, keep the pH in balance. And then once we get the water temperature down, then we can look at closing the pool. And we also want to make sure that we don't close the pool with any particular problems like cloudy water, algae. Take care of those first before we close the pool, because they're not going to get any better over the winter if we don't take care of them now. Hey, Tony, you think I should hit the mute there? Let's just, let me do this. There, I'm just going to mute people for a second here so we don't get the background noise. So let me continue on. So the next step is preparing the pool for winter. And the first thing that we want to do after the water temperatures drop, we want to get the water properly balanced, just like you've been doing all summer. Get the pH in balance, total alkalinity, calcium hardness. If you use optimizer, we want to get the optimizer level in the proper range. And in fact, let me hang on one second here. Let me just get. Bear with me one second here with some technology. Hey, Tony, can you unmute yourself?
Yep, I'm
Okay,
here.
perfect. I just wanted to make sure you were there.
Oh,
Okay.
no, sorry. Apologize for
No,
that, Randy.
no, because I had muted you. Let me get back to my slide here. All right. So get the water properly balanced, just like you've been doing all summer. And again, the key here is we want to make sure that the pH, the total alkalinity, and calcium hardness are all in perfect balance. Because again, that water is going to be in there for 6 to 8 months, and if it's not properly balanced, it can cause some damage to the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment. And the most important one is the pH. Hopefully, you've been keeping an eye on that all summer. That we want to keep the pH between 7.2 and 7.6. And any of you that do keep your pool open, don't put a winter cover on your pool. Definitely want to, once a month, check the pH once a month just to make sure it's in the proper range. That's kind of the critical factor. Again, correct any existing problems. If you have any metals in the water, if you bring a water sample into the store, if you've never done this before, they do any of the pool and spa house stores, they do complimentary water testing. They need about a pint of water. They'll give you a prescription sheet of exactly what you need to do to get your water in in proper balance. They'll give you a recipe sheet, basically like this, that will tell you what to add, how long to wait. Again, we want to get that water perfectly balanced so it doesn't cause any damage to the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment. Um, so if somebody,
Go ahead, Randy.
okay,
I've addressed it. Thank you.
very good, thank you. Is the next step is cleaning the pool, and what we're talking about here is getting the water clean of debris, skimming the surface, brushing the walls, vacuum the pool. The idea here is the cleaner the pool is, again, the longer the winterization chemicals are going to last that we put in. Also, if there's any debris, leaves, and pine needles that are laying on the bottom of the pool, if we don't get those out, those can cause some staining. So get the pool as clean as possible. And then the next step, a couple of housekeeping chores. We want to chemically clean the filter. If you've never done this before, I would definitely come into one of the stores. They can tell you which would be the best product for the type of filter that you have. Maybe you're in a hard water area. It kind of depends on what sanitizer you're on. If you use chlorine or if you use soft swim, they'll recommend the appropriate filter cleaner. But this is the best time of year to chemically clean the filter. Basically, what we do is you might say we're shampooing the filter to get all the greases and oils that have gotten in there all summer. You may also want to evaluate, maybe it's time to change, maybe next spring it's time to change the filter media. If you've got a sand filter, or if you use the crushed glass, we typically recommend about every 5 years to change the filter media. If you've got a cartridge filter, those typically last a couple, 2 or 3 years. You may want to invest in a new filter for next spring, just to make sure. If we don't have good filter performance during the summer, we're probably not going to have good water quality. So chemically clean the filter, clean the water line. So there's cleaners like off the wall that we can put on a sponge or a scrub brush to clean the water line. The idea here is if we've got any kind of a scum line or a mineral deposit on the water line, that hardens up over the winter and can be very difficult to remove next spring. So those are kind of the housekeeping chores: skim, vacuum, brush the pool. We definitely want to brush the pool. If there's any debris on the walls, the bottom of the pool, we want to get that's clinging to the walls. We want to get that off into the water where either the chemicals can remove it or the filter can remove it. So again, we want to get that water balanced, cleaned, and then we can really move on to the winterization products that we're going to put in. Actually, one more. Any of you that have a salt water system that utilizes a chlorine generator, that's what this device is down in the bottom left-hand corner. This cell that the water goes through that actually generates the chlorine with this system, it tends to build up with scale. So we recommend once a year chemically cleaning that cell. So if you've never done that before, stop into one of the stores and they can direct you on how to use the cell cleaner to get that debris out of there. If you do have a salt system, we do turn that off during the winter. The salt water systems don't work in cold water, so you definitely want to turn that off for the winter and save it for next summer. And again, as Tony mentioned at the beginning, if you do have any questions, just type them in the chat section and Tony will tell me what the question is, and either him or I can answer the question. All right, so we took care of the cleaning, got the water properly balanced. Now there's really just 2 or 3 different winterization products that we'll put in that will basically prevent the pool from turning green, prevent the pool from bacteria growing all winter and into the spring. And we have 2 sizes of winterizing kits, one that treats up to 12,000 gallons of water and one up to 24,000 gallons of water. And so this is one of the areas where we typically would recommend overdosing and not underdosing. So if you had, say, a 10,000 gallon pool, we'd put the whole 12,000 gallon kit in. If you had a 30,000 gallon pool, we'd put both a 24,000 gallon kit and a 12,000 gallon kit in. And people will always ask Tony and I, how long is this kit going to last? And it really, as far as how long is it going to keep the pool from turning green with algae or having bacteria grow, it really depends on 2 or 3 things. What the water temperature was when you close the pool, is how much debris gets in the pool over the winter, what type of cover do you use or don't use a cover, and I saw the question, what's a winter kit? I'm going to tell you what's inside the kit here in just a second. There's just 2 products. And so it really depends on, as far as how long they're going to last, is to how clean the pool was, what type of cover that you put on the pool, which I'll talk about in a minute. And what we typically would recommend, and what kind of a winter we have as far as air temperatures, do we get rain, snow, that will deplete the chemicals that we put in. And so we want to make sure that, like in February, bring a water sample into the store and we can make sure that you've still got plenty of chlorine in the water. Our cover is recommended.
Yep, sorry, go ahead. You see it?
Yeah, I saw that question, and we definitely would recommend a cover for winterizing. And it's not the solar blanket. If you use the solar blanket during the summer, those are great for keeping the heat in and the chemicals from dissipating as quickly, but those are not meant as a winter cover. You definitely want to take those off. They'll get brittle during the winter, so definitely take those off. And I'll show you the different types of covers here at the end. What was that question, Tony?
Question or a statement here to start with. I bought a cover from the pool store and it's penetrable. So rainwater is going to be mixing in with the pool water, which will dilute the chemicals. Should we use a cover that is not penetrable? And I know you're going to get the covers here soon, but
yeah, that's a good question, because there's pros and cons to both. If you use what we would call a mesh cover, the chemicals are going to get depleted a little bit faster, but you're not going to get the pool on top of a pool if you have a solid cover. So like Tony said, I'm going to talk more about covers in a minute, and there's pros and cons to both of them. So here's what's in the winter kits. So the winter kits, both sizes have either 1 bottle or 2 bottles of the Arctic Blue Shock. This is a long-lasting chlorine-based shock treatment that we'll use in a chlorine or a salt pool. And that's a 2-pound bottle. There's 1 bottle in the 12,000 gallon kit, 2 bottles in the 24,000 gallon kit. We add this directly to the pool with the pump and filter operating. allow it to circulate for an hour or two, and then we would go to the next step. And so what this is going to do, this is going to supply a high level of chlorine. It also has some what's called non-chlorine shock in it, some water clarifiers, pH buffers to help clear up if you got a little bit of cloudiness right now, help clear up the pool. This is the first step, and this is what applies a very high level of chlorine to help hold it for a number of months. And then the second product that we put in is called Arctic Blue Algae Protector. This is a long-lasting preventative algicide. So basically, we're putting chlorine in to kill bacteria. Also, chlorine will kill some types of algae. Then we're putting in a long-lasting preventative algicide that basically work along with chlorine to make sure algae does not have a chance to grow. The 12,000-gallon kit has a pint. The 24,000-gallon kit has a quart. Add that directly to the pool, pump and filter operating. Let it circulate for a few hours to get distributed throughout the pool. And those are the two main products that are in the winter kit for chlorine and saltwater pools. Any of you that are on use soft swim as your sanitizer, I'll talk about that in a minute. But for chlorine and saltwater pools, those are the two primary products that we'll put in. A 12,000-gallon kit or a 24,000-gallon kit, I would recommend rounding up to the larger size. So if you've got an 18,000-gallon pool, put the whole 24,000-gallon kit. This is one area that we would rather overdose a little bit than underdose. Let's say you had a 5 or 6,000-gallon above ground pool. I would put half of the 12,000-gallon kit in now and save the other half for either next winter or maybe in the spring. If we get a real mild winter, you may want to add the other half of the kit to hold the pool over until you're ready to open up the pool in the spring. And speaking of spring, we kind of do the same thing in the spring. We recommend opening your pool when the water temperature gets above 65 degrees. Now, you might not be ready to swim in the pool at that temperature, but at least get the pool open so you can keep an eye on it. Get it circulating, keep the chlorine, it's not going to use a lot of chlorine, get the water properly balanced if it needs to be, keep the chlorine in the proper range. And that way you can keep an eye on it. So when you're ready to open up the pool in, whether it's April, May, June, it'll be ready to go. The kind of the key thing in the spring is that we have enough chlorine in the water, that we always have at least 1 part per million of chlorine in the water. So if you get your test strips out, your test kit out, in February, or bring a water sample into one of the pool and spa house stores, we want to make sure that we've always got at least 1 part per million of chlorine in the water, minimum, because once it drops down much below 1, that's when bacteria and algae can start to grow. Inside the winter kits are some coupons that can be used off a number of different products. One that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute called Pool Closing Complete. There's a product called Smart Shield that actually puts kind of an invisible, you might say, film on the water. This acts like kind of you don't have to use a solar blanket. This helps keeps the heat in, kind of an invisible solar blanket. Stowaway is our cover cleaner to clean your solar blanket. And then Pool Complete 911 is a product that we put in next spring. And speaking of Pool Closing Complete, this is kind of the final step. And what this product is for is to help protect the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment from the damage that can be caused over the winter, helps prevent corrosion, any scaling, which is kind of a white mineral deposit in the equipment. If you've got any trace metals in the water, it will prevent staining of the pool. And then it also helps prevent the water line buildup that we sometimes get over the winter. So this product's mainly to protect the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment. And one bottle treats up to 25,000 gallons. So that's for a chlorine pool. That's really the winterizing kit. Pretty simple. Get the water balanced, take care of the housekeeping chores, chemically clean the filter. And then as far as the winterizing products, choose your appropriate size winter kit for the number of gallons that you have in your pool. And if you're not exactly sure how many gallons you have in your pool, if you bring the measurements in to Tony or his staff in the store, they just need to know the shape of the pool, length, width, the depth, if it's a variable depth, the shallow end depth, the deep end depth, and they can calculate the gallonage to make sure that you put the right amount of product in. And then we'd use pool closing complete, strip quick to clean your filter, and off the wall to clean the water line. So from a water chemistry standpoint, for a chlorine pool, that's all you need to do. Any questions? Tony, any other questions there?
Not yet. No.
Okay. And then any of you that use soft swim is a non-chlorine option. Some people are allergic to chlorine. This is an all liquid system. You don't need a special feeder or anything like that. If you use soft swim, again, this is a non-chlorine system. We use the same product you've been using all summer, but we're going to put in their initial dose. So the soft swim A, which is the algicide, we put in 1 quart per 25,000 gallons. We add 1 gallon of soft swim C, which is basically the shock treatment. And then we top the soft swim B level, which is the actual sanitizer. We top that up to 50 parts per million. And that would be the winterization chemicals that we'd use in a soft swim pool.
Randy, quick question. Let me bounce over there. When topping off your chemicals around February, the pump is obviously off. Does the chemical mix enough in water that is still?
That's a great question, because if the water is not circulating, we can still add the chemicals to the water. And if, let's say you had a cover on your pool, the pump was off, you can pull a corner of the cover back. You might, if it's really cold, you might need to, let me get this person admitted here.
I got it.
Okay, we can add the chemicals to the water. We just maybe pre-dissolve if it's the Arctic Blue Shock, pre-dissolve it, add it to the corner of the pool, get your brush out and just brush the water a little bit to get it dispersed to the rest of the pool. Sometimes people think that they can't add chemicals if the water doesn't circulate. You can, and a lot of times that'll save you from the pool turning green in the spring by just getting another dose of the Arctic Blue Shock in there.
And there's one more question, Randy. The question is, when cleaning the filter is done during a backflush or backwash or just normal filtering? So when cleaning the filter, is that done during a backwash or just a normal filtering? So for the strip quick process.
Yeah. So another good question. So you do that in the backwash. So you'd add the strip quick. You could either add it through the skimmer or through the pump pot. And Tony and his staff have detailed directions on how to do this in the store. But you would turn the pump off, put the filter in the backwash position, add the strip quick into the pump pot, put the lid back on, then turn the pump on just for a few seconds, and that will move the strip quick into the filter. Then you shut the filter off and just let it sit in there for a couple of hours or overnight. Again, kind of shampoos the sand and then backwash it out a couple hours later or the next day to get rid of the greases and oils and those contaminants that have built up in the filter. All right, so that was the water chemistry piece. Pretty easy. I want to reiterate, next spring, when the weather starts to warm up, February, March, check the chlorine level or bring a water sample into Tony or his staff at any of the stores, because it really depends on what kind of a winter we have. If it's super mild, the chemicals that we put in the winter kit don't last as long. If it's harsh and it's freezing cold, they last longer. And it also depends on what type of cover, or if you don't cover the pool. If you don't cover the pool at all, they're not going to last quite as long. If you have a mesh cover, a little bit longer than not covering it. That from a chemistry standpoint, the solid covers are the best, but the downside with a solid cover, you get a pool on top of the cover. So I'll talk more about covers in a minute. Okay, so really the next step is deciding how you're going to prevent freeze damage. And there's basically 2 methods of preventing freeze damage. You know, with the Portland, Vancouver area being fairly mild, it may freeze it's typically we're going to get some freezing temperatures. It just depends on how long. That's kind of the first method. We'll talk about letting the pool being able to circulate. In fact, some people run the pump 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's not necessary. From a freeze damage protection standpoint, we just need to make sure that if the water is filled up in the pool, that it's able to circulate when we get freezing temperatures. So if you watch the weather forecast and we're going to get down around 32 at night or during the day, and you've got water still in the pump filter, in the plumbing lines, that water needs to circulate so it can't freeze. That's the first method. That's probably the method that most people in the Portland, Vancouver area use. The other method is like they use in Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, where they actually will drain the water out of the equipment. They'll, some cases, drain the water down below the skimmer, like in an above ground pool. So I'll talk about both methods. Get my slide to advance here. And so this is probably the most common method. It typically done in milder climates. It may or may not freeze. Less frequent applications. Again, once you do the chemistry piece of it and you put a cover on the pool, excuse me, there's really no reason to run the pump except for freeze damage protection. And so, again, if you're going to keep the water level up to the skimmer, you're going to keep water in the plumbing lines, in the equipment, you just have to remember that the pump has to be running when we get freezing temperatures, because what will happen is if the water freezes in the pump or the filter, like that slide I showed at the beginning, the water will freeze, it'll expand, and it'll break the pump and the filter and possibly plumbing lines. And so this is the first method and probably the most common method. Tony, any comments on this before I get to the colder climate method?
No, other than this is a fairly common method. We don't typically get too deep into the chill, but yeah, go ahead on the next one. I might have an end comment there.
And so the next method, this is how they winterized in Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington. There's a fair amount of people in the Portland, Vancouver area that will do this method as well, where we'll get the water drained out of the equipment. Somebody will come, either yourself or you'll have service department come out and blow the lines so there's no water in the plumbing lines. That's the way they typically, in the real cold climates, they'll in some cases do a partial drain the water down below the skimmer. In the case of an above ground pool, they'll drain the water down below the skimmer, move the equipment into the garage so it's protected. So really the only thing in an above ground pool, the only thing you have out in the environment is the pool itself. And letting the pool freeze, getting a few inches of water on top of the pool, that's not going to cause any damage typically to the pool unless we got a lot of rain and the water level got up to the coping line or up to the top of the pool and then it froze and expand. That could cause some damage to the coping. But so you do need to keep the water pumped out as it starts to overflow, so that is not a potential for happening. But this is what they would do in the colder climates, where they'll blow that over here. That's one of the returns where they'll blow the water out of the returns. So basically, we evacuate all the water out of the plumbing lines, out of the equipment. So there's nothing that can freeze except the water in the pool. Tony, go ahead if there's something you're going to add here.
Excuse me. No, I don't think so, Randy. Thank you.
Okay. And so the other piece that we need to protect, if you're not going to keep the pool filled up and circulating during freezing temperatures, we also need to pay attention to the skimmer. So in that top right-hand picture, this is an in-ground pool, and that little purple device that's going down in the skimmer, it's actually called a gizmo that screws into the skimmer so that when water does get into the skimmer from rain, and the water level comes up in the pool and gets into the skimmer, that excuse me, that basically absorbs the expansion of the ice so it doesn't break the skimmer. And so that'll be added. Sometimes people just take a gallon jug and put some gravel in it to give it some weight. They'll put that in the skimmer just to protect the skimmer from freeze damage. Sometimes down in that bottom picture, sometimes people will put a faceplate occasionally on the skimmer. Again, we just need to make sure if we're going to do this method that all the water is out of the plumbing lines, it's drained out of the equipment. Like I mentioned earlier, the above ground pool, if you drain the water down below the skimmer, you can disconnect all the equipment, put it in the garage so it doesn't have to sit out in the weather all winter and protect it over the winter. If you have a sand filter with a valve like this, some of these valves will actually have a winter setting. If you don't have a valve that has a winter setting, you just want to put it in between settings so that it's not putting pressure on the gasket, the spider gasket that's inside there. You don't want to put it in between settings. If you're not going to circulate the water or be able to circulate, take that, put that in between setting, make sure all the water is out of the filter, out of the pump, out of the heater, turn the power off to the pump, turn the gas off to the heater. Again, this is the full-blown winterization method, like they do in Eastern Washington, and some folks do in the Portland market. Any questions
Randy,
on yeah?
Yeah, Randy, there's a bank of questions here. If we could pause for a second and let's address some of these. So the next question is, we have always left the pump on during the winter. Is this not necessary?
So that's a great question. It's like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's not 100% necessary except for freeze damage protection. If you left the pool, I don't know if you leave your pool uncovered. I guess the one caveat would be if you leave the pool uncovered, I would want to probably circulate the pool at least a few hours a day. If you've got a time clock, to make sure we're picking up any debris, some of the debris that gets into the pool. I'd also want to make sure that, if you leave it uncovered, that occasionally you get your vacuum out and vacuum the pool. But from a chemistry standpoint, if you put either a mesh cover or a solid cover on the pool, except for the freeze damage protection, there's not a lot of need to run the pump from a chemistry standpoint. What else, Coney? Was there another one?
Yeah, the next question is this for above ground to keep running or to drain and remove? So I think this is an above ground pool that's asking, do we keep things running or drain and remove? And again, it goes back to, just depends on which method you choose to do. But I would emphasize that if you're choosing to winterize your pool and not kind of keep things loosely, not keep things running with periodic, a few hours here and there to keep things, circulating and keep tabs of the chemistry loosely. If you're going to actually winterize an above ground pool equipment, again, emphasize the fact that you should drain it fully and take certainly drain the pump out and get that out of the weather, and preferably the sand filter, cartridge filter as well. So I guess it depends on which method you use. Some people love to keep things running and they love the ambiance even in the winter, but it just depends on which method you choose. And again, we can discuss this more, at your closest retail store as well. Next question is, how many RPM should it be run for freeze protection? So like if you had a variable speed pump. Randy, you want to hit on that?
That's probably more in your wheelhouse, Tony. It wouldn't have to obviously be the same speed that you run during the summer. I don't know if they have a recommendation for that, Tony. Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not aware of a specific recommendation, but really it's, if there's a threat of freezing and your equipment is still hooked up, whether it's above ground pool or certainly an in-ground pool, your equipment's hooked up. But if there's a threat of freezing and water is still in the system, just make sure you're running that pump. Do not turn on a heater, leave the heater off. You don't need to heat the water. You just need to circulate. You just need to move the water if your system is not winterized. But if you're loosely running it, like an in-ground pool pump, variable speed pump, probably 1500 RPM, something on that slow side is adequate. I don't know if there's necessarily a sweet spot, but you certainly can run it at a much lower RPM. There's a few more questions. Let's get to one more, and then we'll come back to the rest. This person says I use option two, which they do a hard freeze or hard shutdown,
Yeah.
but I drain the water about a foot and a half in the pool. So they only leave about a foot and a half of water in the pool. With the amount of rain we get, has worked every year. Essentially, it's filled back up, it sounds like. Are there any risks to the pool when draining this much water?
I I guess if you've done it before and it hasn't caused any issues, I get a little bit nervous draining the pool too far down, depending on what type of a pool it is. If it's a vinyl line pool, sometimes if you get the water level too low, the liner will pull out, and won't go back into place next spring. So I'd just be a little bit careful of that. I mean, we typically would recommend going just, down below the skimmer if you're going to do this method, and then keep an eye on it. If obviously we get a lot of rain in the Northwest and some snow, as that water level comes up, you definitely want to pump it down so it's not overflowing. But we do get a little bit nervous about draining pools too far down, because if you're in an area, if it was an in-ground pool and we drain an in-ground pool too far and you have any kind of water table issues, we have seen pools pop out of the ground before, and we definitely want to obviously avoid that. So that would be my only concern.
Yeah, in this particular pool, Randy, there's not a liner involved. Um, let's see, there was another question that came. Oh, yeah, the next question kind of ties into it. The question is, would you consider Portland area at 1,000 feet elevation to be cold climate or mild climate? And I guess to that answer depends on the year here. It really does. The this last year we had a little bit harder freeze, and there was several, and that's probably saying lightly. There's several of our customers that had freeze damage and broken systems somewhere, whether that's the pump or the filter. They had cracked pipes and plumbing and equipment that needed attention, and that really took a bite out of the swim season this year. So every year is going to be different. And just like the discussion we just had about, water tables and how low should you drain your pool, every year is going to bring something different, even in terms of rainfall. So as long, just be aware of the water table, and if you've only left a foot or an inch and a half of water in your pool, if there's a long history doing that, then you're probably safe. But we're certainly not going to encourage that, just from the standpoint of we don't want that pool popping out of the ground.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
go ahead.
I just was going to say, Tony, just so it you just have to decide one way or the other. If you do the mild climate winterization, you just need to be really alert on and if you turn the pump off, just need to be really alert on the air temperature conditions and get that pump running um, when we're going to get close to freezing temperatures. The other method, the full winterization method, is a lot more foolproof. Once you drain the water out of the equipment, blow the water out of the plumbing lines. Really, the only thing you have to do is watch the water level and pump the water out if it's starting to get too high. That's probably the more foolproof method, but quite a bit more involved.
Oh, Randy, there's a clarification on the question. That particular pool owner only pumps a foot and a half of water out, so there's still many thousands of gallons left in the pool. So that's good. That's
Yeah,
a much
yeah.
better that's a much better way. Yeah, we have a few more questions, but Randy, let's go ahead and get a little bit deeper, and then
Okay.
we'll come back to those.
All right, very good. So really the last piece of it is deciding if you're going to cover the pool or not. And there's, several different types of covers. The first ones we're going to talk about, these are solid covers, and these don't allow anything through. I mean, you might get a little bit under that slip through the underside of the cover a little bit, but these are pretty much solid. The top right is an above ground pool that's got a solid cover. Um, the bottom one is obviously an in-ground pool that's held down by water tubes. And so if you do use the solid type cover down there at the bottom and you use these water tubes, you want to make sure that you don't overfill those so that when they freeze, they don't expand and break. When you put the cover on the pool, you want to make sure it's not tight on the cover. They're oversized for the pool. Like, what is it, 2.5 feet, Tony?
2.5 feet, yeah, per side.
Yeah.
So the box will say it's 5 feet bigger than the pool size.
Yeah. And so you want to make sure it's flat on the water so that when it does rain or snow, that it doesn't pull the cover into the pool. You do need to periodically, we get a lot of rain, pump the water off. And maybe Tony, talk, what you've got a couple of different types of cover pumps, don't you?
Yeah, when you talk about cover pumps, there's a discussion about automatic cover pumps and then just manual electric still pump style. So your real basic pump, you still plug it into electricity, but it's just a manual. It's running as long as it's plugged in, and they all use a garden hose kind of an attachment. But that's something that you're gonna monitor that pool cover closely, and you're gonna go out there yourself and put that pump on the cover and pump the water off when necessary. The automatic ones are much better because they will sense the water. There's a float inside of it, and as the water builds up on top of that cover, it'll engage that float, kind of like a toilet bowl or whatnot, and then it'll kick on the pump automatically. So the automatic cover pump is much preferred, but you have options.
Very good. And then as far as cover care, um, again, we want to keep the excess water drained off the top. And then when you pull the cover off next spring, we do want to clean it. There's a chemical cleaner called Stowaway that allows you to clean the cover and also put it away wet so it won't mold and mildew over the summer. All right, so that was a solid cover. This is a mesh cover. There's a couple of different types of mesh covers. This is a mesh safety cover. There's regular mesh tarp type covers like we saw with the solid covers. And so these obviously look a little bit nicer if you've got concerns with small children that could fall into the pool. These are truly safety covers that you could actually walk across if you wanted. They are mesh, so they do allow some fine debris, obviously rainwater into the pool. So the winterizing kits don't last quite as long with these types of covers. So you may want to check the water chemistry a little bit sooner. You know, maybe late January, early February, just to make sure you've got plenty of chlorine still left in the water. If the chlorine level's gotten depleted, we could pull a corner of the cover back, pre-dissolve some of the Arctic Blue shock, pour it into the corner of the pool, brush it to get it dispersed to the rest of the pool. But need to keep a little bit closer eye if you've got a mesh cover. But these work extremely well, and then you don't get the pool on top of a pool like you do with the solid covers. But you still would want to keep an eye on the water level, and you're going to probably have to pump it out periodically. And then we have automatic covers. So a lot of in-ground pools are built with automatic covers. It is important if you've got an automatic cover that you do keep the water level up. If you're going to use the cover during the winter, the water level does need to be in the normal level so that because it supports the cover. So it's important and to keep the water level up. Um, to protect the cover, but these covers work extremely well. You can clean these with Stowaway as well. If the cover's gotten a little bit dirty, you can clean these as well. But check the water level, check any water on top of the cover, and pump that off as well. And then really the last option is just not covering your pool. And a lot of people do that. They, just like the beauty of the pool in the backyard. There's just going to be a little bit more maintenance. You want to be able to vacuum the pool periodically because if you do get debris laying on the bottom of the pool, that can stain the pool. So you want to be able to vacuum periodically. Definitely want to check the sanitizer level and the pH level monthly to see if that needs to be adjusted because obviously the rainwater is going to dilute the chemicals, the winterizing chemicals. It's going to affect the pH, the dirt and debris. So definitely, you can sure leave it open. It's just going to be a little bit more work involved during the winter. Um, this might be another good place for some more questions, Tony.
Yeah, so jumping back in, how do you drain water? Kind of going back to the equipment side of things, how do you drain water from the pump, systems equipment, and piping in an in-ground pool? So what does that look like?
Yeah. That might be more in your wheelhouse, Tony. Go ahead.
Yeah, so while I'm in the retail side of things and not in all of your pump houses from a service department standpoint, every piece of equipment, whether it's your pump, for example, has got probably two or three drain plugs on it. If you're going to fully drain your system, you're going to undo all of those drain plugs. If your heater has got at least, I think, two drain plugs, certainly on the header, you drain pull the plug from the headers, and I think also down below, but I'm not 100% certain on that. And this is going to lead into another question. Your sand filter has got a drain cap down on the bottom end of it. And now behind that drain cap, there should be a screen. So when you take off that drain cap, you should not lose any filter media out from that, because it should be like inside your sand filter. If you have a sand filter, there's what we call laterals, little collectors. And there's only enough space in those laterals to allow clean water to go back into your pool and leave the sand or the glass media in your filter. It's the same way with the drain plug. There should be a little screen that keeps the media and everything inside. So if you undo that drain plug and you lose all the media out of it, I would loosely open that cap just to maybe, barely allow water to trickle out, and handle that very carefully. But you definitely want to get that filter repaired, you know, every about 3 to 5 years, depending on what type of media you have in your filter, that should be replaced. So when you do hit that next cycle where it's time for your filter media to be replaced, I would have that filter fixed and get the correct part for that. And hopefully it's not too old that part is still available. So yeah, if you have a salt system, the salt cell, that should just be disconnected from the spliced in line, and remove it. Clean it with the cell cleaner. If you don't have a cap, Hayward and Pentair both have caps, and we have them at all of our stores. We'd screw on one end, and so it sets it upright to use for the cleaning process for soaking. But anyway, for winterizing, you just remove the salt cell from its position. If you have like a chlorine feeder, that's a little bit more tricky, because you're going to have to very carefully, with eye protection and hand protection. The best way to do that is just to disconnect the line from your plumbing. That taps back into your plumbing if you have an offline feeder. I'm sure I'm probably missing something. And if I am, and you have more questions, please come into our stores or call our service department. We certainly would be glad to help. And then to blow out the piping, really using compressed air, I think, is what our service department uses. And you're always going to blow from the equipment. There's probably a manifold or something where all the pipes come in from your pool into the front of the pump. You're going to open all your valves, and you're going to force air and drain the water backwards into the pool. And at that point, you've already lowered the water level in your pool, so that water can go back into the pool without coming back into the line. So that's a little bit about how to clean the piping or flush the piping. Another question: during a freeze, if we don't blow out the lines or drain the pool, when running the pump for freeze protection, can it be run at low RPM? Is there a suggested RPM minimum? So I think we've already answered that. I don't think there's necessarily, well, the right answer is to consult your user's manual, certainly. But, anything 1,000, 1,500 RPM, somewhere there, just as long as that water's moving, it's not apt to freeze. So,
Yep, for sure.
We've already answered that question. A couple more here. Would we add the winter products, Randy, back to you? Would we add the winter products to the pool after we drain the water below the skimmer for an above ground pool? What does that look like?
So you could do that. Usually we recommend adding it with the water level up and circulating. If you Obviously you're going to be dumping some of the chemicals out. Some people will drain the water down first, then they'll add the chemicals to the pool and just use their brush to circulate it, because you need to get the product distributed. So they'll pour it into sprinkle it around the edge of the pool, and then get their brush out and just circulate it to get it dissolved and distributed throughout the pool. Either way is fine.
And we'll do one more question, Randy, and then we'll let you bounce back in, and then we'll come back
Okay.
toward the end and make sure we get all the rest of the questions covered. If you keep the pump running, do you still cover it? Yes or no?
Yeah, we would still recommend covering it. So, and the reason for that is you don't have to cover it, but covering it is going to make sure that the winterizing products that we put in last longer. And probably the biggest thing is it's going to stop the debris from getting in the pool and making it such a job in the spring to, especially if you've got a lot of trees with leaves and debris that would get into the pool. That's gonna wear on the winterizing chemicals. Plus, that debris could put some stains in the pool. So I highly recommend putting a cover on. And unless you just want to have the pool open and love the beauty of the pool, and you've got the time to do the maintenance during the month, um, to keep the pool clean and to check the sanitizer and the pH levels.
Randy, this question wasn't asked, but I'm gonna speak to it just because it's on my mind and I'll forget. If you have a robot, a pool cleaner robot, certainly use it all up until the point where you do cover it. Just know that it'll probably work a little bit more lethargically the colder the water is, but it certainly can be used until the point of covering.
Yeah, good point, Tony. And again, really, that's kind of it. And again, just as a reminder, don't close the pool too soon. We want to wait till the water temperature gets down. You might be kind of chomping at the bit to get the pool closed. Um, and you know what? If you decided to close the pool and the water temperature was above 65 degrees, it's not the end of the world, but I definitely would recommend, maybe the end of October, bring a water sample into the store, check the chlorine level yourself. We may need to put another bottle of the winter shock in just to hold it, is it if at the end of October the chlorine levels, gotten down to 1 or 2 parts per million, that's not going to hold you until, March or April, and we may need to put another dose of winter shock in. So again, the key thing is, just as a reminder, if you've got a chlorine pool, a salt pool, if you go out and you check the chlorine level and it's below 1 part per million, that's frankly when all the bad stuff, water chemistry happens. That's when bacteria, that's when algae starts to grow. So use your test strip, utilize the pool and spa house. They'll test the water, complimentary water testing anytime that you need it. You want to just double check that you've got enough chlorine in the water. They'll definitely help you with that. Tony, you want to talk about the coupon here?
Yeah, so Randy's already talked about pool closing complete. This coupon, here's your chance to take out your phone and scan that QR code. That will load up a coupon on your phone. If it doesn't load the coupon, no problem. Just keep that picture on your phone and show it to your store when you go in, and we'd be glad to honor that $10 off. Also, since we're talking about coupons, just another follow-up reminder, as Randy already mentioned, there's several coupons, valuable coupons in the winter kits. So please do take advantage of those as well. Randy, we do have a few more questions.
Okay, shoot.
Um, let's see. This is a good one. How about snow load on solid covers? How should we handle snow load?
Oh, man, I don't know. What do they recommend, Tony? Is there a recommendation for that?
Well, the good news is when it snows, right, it's light and fluffy, so I would just take a broom and gently just sweep it off, or a blower, maybe an electric or gas blower, and just blow it off. That's something you want to stay on top of. Check, keep it on the forecast as we approach the deep winter time. But I would try to keep the snow off the cover, because when it melts, it creates more of an issue there and more of a load to handle that, to get it off. At that point, it's much easier to blow it off with a blower, or sweep it off gently versus, you know, having a pump to pump off the water once it all melts. Another question. This is a good one. For a mesh cover, what is the best way to pump off the water? Should you just drain it via the filter? And that's actually a good one. You could do both. You could either put a automatic cover pump and just leave it on top of your mesh cover. Although the issue there is And I've seen people do that, but as the water rises, it's going to tend to overflow onto the pool deck versus raise enough to trigger that float. So that's actually a great way to drain water is just do a backwash.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
what I was going to say. Yep.
Um, and a tandem piece to that question, if you don't drain the pool pipes, if you don't drain the pool pipes, but keep it open so you can run the pump during a freeze, do you need to drain the heater since it will be off? And the answer is no, just keep water moving. Now, the ideal setup is if you have a bypass around your heater, so that way you can adjust, you can turn the valves rather and bypass the heater from water even flowing through it. And then you would also, if that would be the case, you would drain the heater completely with all the drain plugs and such and totally remove the water from the heater. Most pump rooms don't have a bypass in their heater. Just keep the water running through it. That's what you need to do. Don't turn it on because that'll build up condensation and cause damage to the heater. Leave it off. Just keep the water running through it. This customer has a chlorinator. Should I leave any chlorine tablets in it during the winter operation, Randy?
Um, you know what? If you're going to keep the pool able to circulate, it's not a bad idea I would turn the chlorinator way down. But if you keep a little trickle of chlorine in there, that's just some extra protection. I turn it way down because you're not going to need a lot of chlorine going in, but that's not a bad idea if you've got a chlorinator and keep a tablet or two in there, but shut it way down. So it's just put a little trickle of chlorine in there. That would be good extra protection because again, the main thing that causes pools to turn green is running out of chlorine and running out of algicide, but especially running out of chlorine. That's kind of the key factor. That once we run out of chlorine, then the algae starts to grow, especially when we start to get some warmer weather in the spring, more sunlight, then the algae grows faster.
Randy, do we talk about removing stains? I was just taking a quick peek over to some of the questions that were asked at the sign up stage early on. Did we talk about stain removal and dealing with problems such as that before we get
Yeah,
to
no,
winterization? Okay.
no, we didn't, but it's a good question because a lot of times people will get stains on their pool, and if you do get there's a couple of different types of stains. There's metal stains, which would be copper and iron. Typically, copper turns the pool kind of a turquoise greenish blue color, or the water turns kind of a turquoise greenish blue if there's metals in the water. There are stain remover products that will actually, especially if the stain is fairly new, less than a year old, we can get that off with some products that will remove stains like that. And iron is kind of a rusty brown color. Sometimes we'll get also some organic stains from leaves and debris that's gotten blown into the pool. Typically, if it's that type of a stain, we'll use chlorine. We'll just put chlorine around that affected area, a high dose of chlorine, granular chlorine down on that area and brush it aggressively. And it may take a couple of treatments to get rid of an organic stain, but stains can be removed. I definitely would recommend if you've got any staining in your pool, bring a picture of it into the store. In fact, anytime you have any kind of water quality issues, algae, maybe cloudy water, those kind of things, that pictures can really help the staff in the stores help determine what recommendations to make.
Yeah, pictures are huge, super helpful. Thanks, Randy, for that.
Yeah.
If we haven't answered your asked question that was presented in the sign up process, please feel free right now to kind of speak to that. And while you might be typing that out, we have two more questions, and then just an emphasis at the end. So last couple questions. If you add the winter products, I assume you cannot use the pool at all until the late spring. True or false, Randy?
You know what? It kind of depends on how high the chlorine level is because the algicide that we're putting in, no problem with swimming with that. The only caveat is the chlorine level. We really we can't recommend getting in the pool when the chlorine level is above 5 parts per million. That would be the only caveat. And so to give you an idea, when we winterize the pool, you bring a water sample into the store, we put the winter kit in. we're going to be taking the chlorine level, depending on the size of your pool, probably somewhere between 10 and 15 parts per million of chlorine. And so that would be the thing that we would, if the chlorine level is above 5, we would not recommend getting into the pool. That would be the caveat.
Awesome. Thank you. We already, I think, answered this question, but how do you prevent water from pooling on the tarp? And that would be a cover pump. And we would recommend you go into your store and ask about the automatic pool cover pumps. Great tool, makes it super easy, less worry about, hey, is my cover going to get sucked into the pool? That's just a great tool to have on hand. And then the last question really is, will you share the video recorded today? Yes, absolutely. I mentioned at the beginning that we will, probably within the next week or so, we will edit the video and post it on our YouTube page. So our YouTube page, the Pool and Spa House, on YouTube, we have our own channel. You subscribe to the channel, and all the resources, past and present, will be on there. So that's a way to kind of go back and revisit. And again, if your question wasn't answered this evening, bring it into your store. We will get it answered for you. If the staff that greet you don't know the answer, they will find the answer for you, I guarantee, and we'll make sure that you get the information, the resources that you need to close your pool well. We are so thankful for your time tonight. Randy, do you have any other closing remarks?
I guess just a couple things, just as a reminder to, bring a water sample in early next spring, because the thing that we have such a short season in the Northwest, basically, we're lucky if we can swim at Memorial Day, and it's such a short season. And sometimes, especially if we get, rainy springs and you kind of forget about the pool, at least bring a water sample into the store, because really it might just take $15 of chlorine to make sure that pool doesn't turn into the green swamp. Because once the pool turns green, it gets pretty expensive and it takes a lot of time sometimes to fix it. And it might be right before, a birthday party or the 4th of July. And we just want to make sure your pool doesn't turn green and you're able to use it during the short period of time that we have in the Northwest. And I'd like to thank you for joining us as well.
Yeah, outstanding. It has been a privilege and honor to serve you this evening, to give you helpful information. I wish you all a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you into our store soon. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.